Welcome everybody. Welcome everyone who's joining us live tonight. I'm glad a lot of you remembered about the time change. And welcome also to everyone catching the replay. And this one's going to be shared on Stephen's network as well. So welcome to everyone who's also listening in on that one. As usual, I'm hosting from Canberra tonight, which is Ngunnawal country, and I acknowledge the traditional elders past, present and emerging. And it's very exciting to welcome Stephen Drew. Thank you for joining us, Stephen.
Hey, good to be here, Sarah, and lovely to see you again. How are you?
And you can see it's lovely daytime where Stephen is.
Yeah.
Where exactly are you, Stephen?
I'm in London. Right now. They're about to do another lockdown soon, so don't worry. You have all my virtual time, so we can jump into it.
Well, we've got a lot of Melbournians in the group, so yeah, there'll be a lot of sympathies there. I'm not sure if you've heard, but the Melbournians Victorians really are in a very harsh lockdown. Yeah, the rest of us are still sort of living the dream at the moment. So that's great. Can we start, Steve, can you tell us about your background? And you started off as an architect and then how you've sort of segued into what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So I have a degree and diploma in architecture in the UK. So that's called part one, part two. I worked in industry for a few years, and I decided on one day that I felt like going into recruitment. I felt like doing something a little bit different with my career. So, and the skill sets that I really enjoyed. So I always enjoyed pitching, presenting. I really valued what I did in terms of detailing and all that in terms of professional practice, but that wasn't where I felt my affinity was. So I worked in recruitment. I have worked in recruitment for about 6 years. I joined a big company called Bespoke Careers. I think they have an Australian office, so you guys will know them. Really good company. And then I set up my own recruitment company, and now I run an architectural division in a large property recruitment consultancy. So what that means in terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis, I will work with clients such as Heatherwick Studio, Star Hadid. I've worked with Grimshaw in Australia, Cox Architecture, Weston Williamson. I think there's a few those are the few that I've worked in terms of Australia.
Yeah,
so they're the kind of they're the kind of clients that I will typically work for, and they will give me a brief. So with Grimshaw, I'd have a brief in particular, and what it's about is finding the right person for the role, and the right architect or the right BIM manager, whatever it may be. So a lot of my time is on that matchmaking process, and that comes from going through people's CVs and portfolios, but more importantly, meeting the person and kind of getting a feel for them, what they're about and where they're going. Because that's good recruitment, is listening to where people are at in their career and kind of working it out. So for instance, Sarah, you have a child right now. You might, if you were working in a practice with lots of hours, it's about having an honest conversation about where you want to go. And then once you've got that, it's about matchmaking the CV and portfolio and your LinkedIn and a few of the topics we're going to discuss today to focus on the direction you want to go. But half of it can be also working out what direction you want to go into. So, and sometimes when you're in practice, you don't necessarily know that. And it's that process of experimentation and putting yourself out there. And sometimes going to interviews, you learn that you don't want to work for a certain company, and then you have an affinity with another that you might not have had before. So in short, that's what I do. That's my focus, and I enjoy it. It's a bit crazy at times, especially now with coronavirus. That is a whole new world, and we can talk about how, I guess, we all have to change right now and how we have to adapt to the current situation to find jobs and to better ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. We will definitely get to that. Was it a hard decision for you to not really leave architecture, but to transition into something really different, or did it feel quite natural?
Do you know what? I have a friend called Chris Rosero. He's actually the BIM manager for Grimshaw, and he was the chap at the time. So he worked in the same company as me, and I remember the time going, I like architecture, but I'm not too sure this is for me. And that was a bit of a scary decision at the time because, you know, you used to do so many years of it and basically it was
Exactly.
building up to being qualified. And I decided it wasn't right for me. And I felt a bit like a black sheep at the time because, you know, you speak to one or two friends and they're like, what? Haven't you
Yeah.
got a degree and diploma and you've done years in it? And it was a bit crazy. What I would say is because I'm from architecture, I do care about my reputation. I do care about what you can do in recruitment because recruitment, the truth is, and you know, we're all speaking friends here, you get really good recruiters and you get bad recruiters. And some people can work into the industry and they can be very money orientated. And the truth is you can push people into jobs and that person will be remunerated for it. But what I find is that by pushing people into jobs which are not a very good fit, things fall through and you become that guy. And they'll be like, oh, Sarah, do you hear about that Stephen Drew? He got me into this job. He said this company was like this. And it's not like that. So to me, it's about doing it the right way. And so to answer your question, I would never have predicted I went into recruitment when I was studying.
Yeah.
It happened organically, time and place, and thinking hard about what I want. And that's why I moved into. So I'm good at
Yeah.
talking for a living, Sarah.
I think that's really useful to hear because there's all this pressure to sort of know what you want to do and where you want to go when you graduate. And I'm not sure if you know Tara Cull. She's also over your way from Archie English. She was a landscape
Okay,
architect and then also a teacher and diverged into teaching architects English
amazing.
essentially. And yeah, we've sort of shared that similar thing. I don't think any knowledge is lost knowledge. I think you can always hone it into something unique and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that point briefly, the skills I learned in architectural school no doubt helped me out now.
Yeah.
Pitching, presentations, and then obviously the industry experience is essential. And to add that, I mean, we can talk about how to be the best architect here, but those skills are definitely transferable. And just like you said, I know so many people have gone into marketing, communications, or I know someone that was an architect and now runs their own restaurant with a kind of a unique spin on it. There's so much you can do, and I
Yeah.
love the idea. You should be proud it to you could. I still feel involved in architecture, and that's the point. It's never like you are one or you're not. We're all kind of in that field, so
Yeah.
definitely worth mentioning that to your guys because if someone has that passion for journalism, it might be worth looking into it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's it. So our fortnightly theme this fortnight, Stephen, is resumes and portfolios, and I
Ooh,
think it's important to note whether you know some members of the group are coming at that from a first job seeking kind of angle. Others might be coming at it from transitioning from their current job into a better job, and then others might be quite settled or doing their own thing and actually looking at it and thinking about it more from a finding clients and networking opportunity. So my first question was, what do you think are the most common mistakes that young architects make on their portfolios and resumes?
really good question. So the first thing I'd say as a disclaimer, there's no 100% right way, wrong way checklist to do a CV or not. It's kind of got to come from your personality. So that's number one. Always try to get your personality across. There's just a few good suggestions. And a lot of the things that I like to focus on is about in this busy world, especially now, you really have to get the point across of who you are, what you're about, and what you're looking for really quickly. So all the kind of points that I'm talking about is theming upon that. So so when you're doing a CV, always think about: am I communicating what I'm looking for? Am I communicating the skill set that I have? And am I communicating my value? Am I communicating my contact details? So the whole mission on a CV and portfolio, of course, you want to wow someone, and that will come from your work and how you display that. But stuff like legibility, this CV needs to be a good file size. It needs to be easy to read, and you need to
Yes.
get the point across of who you are and what you're about in 5 to 10 seconds. And so that's the way I would look at it. I'm less interested in talking about, okay, use this font, use this size, okay, because there's so many variables. And it's like you as a designer in terms of architecture. you're going to have your own je ne sais quoi. You're going to have your own spin on it, much like you'd hit your own project. But it's exactly the same thing as when you're designing for a client. They need to understand that idea. They need to get excited by it, and they need to understand it quickly. So when you're doing a CV, make sure a few quick things is you don't want it too long. You don't want it to exhaust people. You want it a nice succinct size, maybe 1 or 2 pages, and it needs to be really clear. A white background is always a good place to start. You don't, it's like anything else. You don't want to overload someone with too much information. You don't want too little. And so it's about getting the balance. And can you read the font? Have you put all the relevant work experience and the order of stuff? You always want to put your most recent, whether it's academic work or professional skill set at the front and experience. And if you haven't worked in architecture yet, that's absolutely fine as well. I worked in Waitrose, which is like a big supermarket in the UK. It's really important to mention this stuff because I was dealing with some really lovely customers, and then you might get some difficult customers, right? And that's all really good experience. You might not need to flash out too much responsibilities about how much I worked the tills, but just to say I worked in it, I had customer service, I got involved with databases, Excel, money, business, that's good. You can cover them points. And any work experience that you've done, which is kind of in the creative fringe of architecture, which may not be architecture so whether it's artwork or competitions, should have put all that stuff in. If you have experience in an architecture practice, that's what you want to hone in on. And you will talk about the project, you talk about the sectors, and you talk about the software. That's generally the way I would go about it. And so when you've got stuff like software in your CV as well, try to be very literal with things. So say now Sarah's the employer, I want to work with Sarah's architectural practice. I will try to be clear and succinct as possible. So the kind of the mission in my CV is I'd want to get across to Sarah really quickly that I am a Part 2 architectural assistant. I'm available in London. I have 4 weeks notice. Here's my contact details at the top, my mobile number, my address, everything. And then the mission statement I would have not too long, quite succinct. So I am Stephen Drew. I'm a Part 2 architectural assistant. I'm looking for a new job. I've got 2 to 3 years experience at EPR Architects working on residential projects using MicroStation and Revit, and REBA stages 2 to 4. So REBA stages are what the stages of the building are in the UK. You would have your equivalent in the area. So the point was, so Sarah immediately knows what level I'm at, what software I've used, and what experience I've had in industry. If you're a student, it's the same thing. I'm an architectural graduate. I just graduated with a 2-1 or a predicted 2-1. I have used this certain software, so I'm available immediately, and I'm looking in the Melbourne area. Here are my contact details. I would love to hear from you. And then from there, you kind of go into it and you have a bit more detail. That's my philosophy and theory about it. If you think at some point it isn't clear, then that's where you need to go back and always give your CV to your mom and all this stuff, and always think about whether they can understand it. So mom's not going to understand what module 2 was in university and but what you're trying to get across is something that everyone can read quite quickly and easily. And if you can get that feedback, then you're halfway there.
Yeah, I always find it sort of a double-edged sword because I think some people would be horrified if they knew how quickly you get judged as a piece of paper from an employer. When I'm flicking through candidates, I'll form an opinion very quickly, and often it's not even what they've said, but how they've said it. Is it tidy and aligned and presented well? No, well, probably not great attention to detail. But then on the flip side, when you've got your final list of who you're looking for, you are really scrutinizing that detail. And the number of, I think my really big pet hate, Stephen, is that a lot of young architects will do their resume and portfolio in a program like InDesign, which doesn't have a good spell check function built in. And you just get the worst spell checks. So I'm always hounding everyone on, using something like Grammarly to check it over and get someone to read it. And because you're presenting the best of yourself, I don't think there's any excuse to have spell checks in there. I liked your little example about the cover statement, because I think that's something that varies a lot and can be used really differently. I was keen on your thoughts on professional photos. Whether having I feel quite strongly you should have a photo that makes eye contact and looks professional, but maybe that's just me.
Again, I think there is a certain level of subjectivity and taste with it, because I've heard two sides of the stories and I kind of bounce back between my opinion changes on a day-to-day basis. I think when I see a really good example of, like you say, a really professional picture and the eye contact's there and someone's friendly, I'm like, oh yeah, brilliant. This is great, because I've got a feel for the person and I want to invite them in. I think it can completely go the other way as well. So if your picture's unflattering, or it's a bit like, hey, here's me in front of the shot,
Instagram, yeah,
yeah, then it goes the other way, and you're like, oh, I don't know. So what you got to be careful with pictures is that they can form a bias, and that can be a bias which goes in your favor or against. So they're a bit like a delicate art. And I would say use a picture when you feel confident, or maybe you've had feedback on if the picture's good or professional from a few people before doing it, because people can make assumptions, and we're in the real world. And sometimes people have a bias towards it. I mean, most architects, most people, everyone, good people, right? You just will find in life that there are certain prejudices. And I think that sometimes that can come up. And that's the truth, so it could be religion, it could be ethnicity. So that's where you got to be careful. I know a lot of employers, and also, like you said, a good example of photo, it's actually got people in the interview. So on the flip side, I've seen it work really well. They're like, oh yeah, I need a fun, bubbly person like that on my team. I've also seen in the UK examples where it can get not people won't get the job, because I mean, technically employers, you can't be ageist, you can't be sexist, and most of them aren't. It just does happen sometimes that people form and biases that they don't even know they have.
Oh yeah, we all have biases. Yeah, and I always say as well, check the office website. Like my office, all of our photos are friendly and fairly casual. So if we get ones that are very sort of serious and art house, that's a real turn off for us. But then it could be the opposite with other firms.
Yeah, I think what I would say is, where you going with the photo? Sorry to cut you off this. It's about personality, and I think the ballsy thing is with this is that your CV and portfolio is a vehicle to ideally get you an interview. And the photo, what you're talking about, is inserting a bit of personality. But it's stuff like, I imagine if I rang you up, Sarah, and when you're receiving portfolio, and we had a chat, and I tried to break a little bit of a chink in it. I go, hey, I know coronavirus is a bit crazy right now. Here's my CV and portfolio. I'm a graduate, I love the work that you've done, Sarah. I love the architectural practice where you're at. It's really interesting. And I know that you've won a large-scale residential scheme. So I'd love to see if there's a job there. That's probably going to attract your attention, right?
Yeah.
And it's a bit like that with a picture. Anything you can do to add personality and warmth to convey that you're a real person, smart, intelligent, that's what's going to get you a job in interview.
Yeah, exactly. Stephen, do you think there's certain ways that architecture resumes and portfolios are different to generic resumes and portfolios?
Yeah. So repeat the first bit, because it broke up slightly.
Are there particular ways that an architecture resume and portfolio should be different to a generic resume and portfolio? Because I guess a lot of people start by Googling generic examples out there.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think a good portfolio is always quite clear and crisp. Portfolios is really one of them things where a lot of it will be based upon the work you've done. So it's a bit like going into an editing studio. So it's like recording Lord of the Rings. I've got like 9 hours of footage, and then and somewhere in there you want to carve out the masterpiece, which was Lord of the Rings, and get that 2.5 hours of juicy goodness, right? Now the problem is, if you haven't got the 9 hours of footage to begin with, it's a bit of an uphill battle. But most people, I find, because we're architects in university, will generally have a lot of stuff. And so I find the battle of a good CV and portfolio is actually editing and curating.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes less is more, or what you need to think of it is that the portfolio, that a generic I think that Architects, we don't have generic portfolios, and that's the point I'm getting on. It's so specific and unique. Where you have to be careful, though, is going off on a tangent. And I like to use the analogy that you have to be really careful with portfolios not to send someone the full discography. So, you know, the Beatles, you'll have all the albums, the 12 albums, discography from everything from start to end. I find that most people will chuck everything they've done at someone, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. What a good portfolio is should be the best hits. And I want to grab your attention, Sarah. So I'm going to send you like the killer image, the professional work at the start, so that you subliminally go, oh, Steve's worked in an office, so that's cool. We can get him on board. Or, oh wait, he's done a bit of experience. And then if you haven't got that, then what I would challenge people to do is you got to think about what is transferable from academic work to professional. So you want to, of course, I want to wow Sarah with my cool ideas and all this stuff and how good a designer I'm going to be. But I want to kind of illustrate that I've done a technical drawing, that I know how to use Revit, that I can do visualizations, so that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to subliminally tell you that I can fit in the office. So the goal would be like, oh yeah, let's get Steve in because I've got this project at early stages and apparently he's a Revit whiz and we can get him doing the 3D modeling. Let's get him in for an interview. And so that is why a architectural portfolio, the whole goal of the portfolio is, of course, to quote unquote sell yourself. You want to attract the employer to invite you in, but really what you're doing is you're solving their problem. So a generic portfolio, and the point you're going is these templates, it might give a little bit of a sexy layout, but it's all comes down to what the images then are and how you communicate how I'm going to solve the problems of the practice. That's what a job is. A job is an opening in a business where there is a need for someone to help to generate revenue. So that's what you have to remember is what a job is. And the way you succeed and get into a company is by conveying in the CV and portfolio that you can fix their problem. So in this analogy of Sarah's team, I need to convince Sarah that I can help her with her project, that I'm going to be a good return on investment, that I'm going to be a good team contributor, and that I'm going to help the practice grow. So return on investment sounds a bit businessy, but if you think about it in terms of a practice is going to put a lot of investment in you. They're going to help you develop, but in return, you're going to get amazing experience. And in terms of a business sense, the way you become indispensable is that if you help companies out to turn a profit and to make excellent projects to help that project go into design magazines, then hey, you are going to become indispensable. And in that sense, you've given them more than they've invested in you. And that is how employees go up and up and up in the practice. So a long, winding, meandering answer, but the portfolio needs to convey
that's a great
that.
frame of mind, I think, to approach it with, and a good refresher, especially when you're coming out of that uni mindset, which is I must be the starving artist for the greater good of the world and solve the world's problems. It's a refreshing way to look at it. Are there any stand out supplementary or unique things that you've seen in resumes and portfolios over the years?
Do you know what? You get a few that really stand out and wow you. And it is true that I can't put a finger on it because it's quite funny when we're talking about it. So one of my greatest strengths and weaknesses, it was a massive weakness. I think of it now as a strength, is that I have a really short attention span, right? And I just think that if you can get past me, then you're going to do well with the employer. And so when I'm recruiting, I always think about, so if Sarah's the client, I'll go meet Sarah in person and now I'll get a feel for her. I'll get a feel for what the practice is like, the process is. And in my head, that's what I form that kind of opinion. And so when I see someone in the CV and portfolio, so to answer your question, if something blows me away, then I get really excited and I want to put them in front of the company. And it can be many different ways. Sometimes it can just be, I think when a portfolio transcends this quality where it's almost like a pleasure to flick through, and that you're ticking all the boxes, you're showcasing that you have software ability, you showcase that you have this taste, and I get this opinion of this person being just very good. That's when I get excited. And there is no one way of going about it. So I've seen it that it can just be a very strong portfolio, which is delicately balanced and showcases beautiful examples of work. That can be great. There's a few where it can be a technical marvel. Or I generally think that gimmicks don't work. I mean, at first I used to be wowed by a handcrafted, beautiful portfolio. And I think that is nice, provided though that the quality of the work inside is amazing. A beautiful handcrafted portfolio will not save the day if the substance isn't good. But what it does do is when the substance is good, it kind of is like that other level where you're like, oh my gosh, look at this. It's like it was like an artwork. It was like a coffee book that I wanted to keep. And I think that's when it gets to that level, it's exciting. And I think that think of it like an artwork or a piece of work. When Sarah was on about spell checking, it's true. If some people haven't looked at that, then this document, this CV portfolio should be the most important document of your career, because it is your window into it. It's all about who you are and what you're about. And where it wows me, to go back to the question, is when everything is like all the moons align. I never knew what I was looking for, but when I see that CV portfolio, I'm just like, it is good. And you're like, why is it good, Steve? I'm just like, well, it was spell checked, it was concise, had this journey, it wasn't too long, it wasn't too short, the images were good, I understood what the person did, I understood what their passion were, and I really want to invite them for an interview. And so that's the thing. So the unfortunate news is there's no like, hey, if you download this 8-page template, that's going to be the best way for you to get in, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. But I want to encourage everyone to do is go off on that adventure and go off and make that amazing piece of and direct your own like feature film or for your own work or what have you. That's what's going to grab my attention.
One of the rare things that I'm a bit of a sucker for, and everyone's here already knows it, is a personal reference attached.
Yeah.
I'm big on your thoughts. I really love a personal reference because it just makes everything the person's saying about themselves seem real and backed up by someone else. And often they can really be a win for me. And something about them, I always take time to read them top to bottom as well.
They're a big help. Put it that way. Personal references are huge. When I did my CV, because what happens is we all think, personal reference, I've got to ask someone, it's going to be a bit of work, it's going to be awkward. Okay. And so I did references available upon request. And most people do that. And you're right, because what it is, it's a bit more work, but you miss a massive opportunity. So in my role in
called a reference.
but the fact it's there is really valuable. So what I find is sometimes that I can, for instance, have someone that's is a contractor through me in recruitment. And when that contract ends, I always try to get that reference from the employer, because it's the same thing you're on about. I guarantee you, if I send the CV portfolio and that personal reference, which says, Stephen was really helpful in the project, he contributed to the team, the project was this length and we ended it because the project ended and we really wish Daniel well, or whoever, then guess what? That really does help, because what it does is it answers questions, and it goes back to what we're on about with biases. Okay. And if a role is a short stint, or if you haven't worked in industry yet, then these personal references, they're really helpful because they paint a picture of who you are, but they might answer a question which will then get you the interview. So if you have a short period on a role and it happened organically, having it in writing. So if Sarah's project ended quickly and she needed someone temporary, but Sarah thought she was good, this person was good, and then wrote a reference, that's really honest. Whereas what happens is that sometimes if a role is quite short in the CV and it's not explained, then when I'm looking at it, I might go, is this person flaky? Are they really? And you probably not, but your mind wanders into what if
Yeah,
world, and then you're
totally.
like, and so a reference will do that. And also, it might be that let's say you haven't worked in the industry yet, but you were hardworking. Then get a reference from your supermarket thing or whatever, and because
Yeah.
you could have a reference from your boss with Dave and says he worked really hard for us while studying, and that's
Yeah.
really helpful
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So yes, they are very good. Is the short answer. Do it.
Yeah.
Get
Oh,
them.
good. And have you seen any recent good or bad trends in resume and portfolios, or just networking in general over the recent years?
Okay, good question. So this is like my current thought process, and so things change all the time. So um it's just partly inspired by actually even what we were doing. We remember how we met in terms of building the community,
Yeah.
and thinking about all these ways online, okay, to communicate. So you'll find a lot of the current trend right now is, okay, I've got a beautiful Instagram, okay, and I've got my LinkedIn and I've got my Facebook and all these ways to communicate yourselves, as well as digital portfolios online. What you have to remember is that these are all tools to communicate who you are, but you shouldn't rely on one tool, and that shouldn't be the sole purpose. So, and I get a little bit concerned right now. We're all getting comfortable with these tools because you got to remember what they are: the digital platforms and their tools. The upside is that they can get you attention, but you have to remember what they are. And the one thing that I'm getting concerned about is that certain people, I've seen examples where portfolios are quite light, and then they go, well, look at my YouTube, look at my Instagram, or you can see a bit more on LinkedIn. And you can't rely on that. And you can't expect the employee to do it, because for all you know, let's pretend I'm working for you, Sarah. I printed out the CVs on your desk. You're going to read them in the car because you're really busy. And maybe you look on the Instagram, or maybe you don't. You're really, really busy. And also what you've got to remember is that these systems are designed for sucking people in and keeping them on the platform. So it's really dangerous for you to then get an employer to go on your YouTube, because the algorithm will then push the viewer to go to another architecture,
Yeah,
another
sure.
video,
Yep.
and suddenly the focus is gone. So when you use these tools, bring them into you. So it should be the other way around. You shouldn't have a CV and portfolio that then links out to an Instagram. The Instagram should be yours anyways, and you say that you're looking, and you link potential employers to an amazing CV and portfolio. And so the LinkedIn should be a catalyst to stuff that you're doing. It should be a catalyst to getting people to look at the CV and portfolio and to reach out. It should not be the other way around. And I think that because everyone's at home and easily accessible, we're starting to rely on these tools that way, as though my Instagram is like my portfolio. It's not. Okay. And I don't think it is. So that's the thought that I've been thinking about subliminally. I haven't even communicated it to anyone, but that's my current theory of what's
Oh no,
happening
I
right
think
now.
that hits the nail on the head. Yeah, I really like that. It's so useful if you're using it in the right direction,
Yeah.
rather than reversing it back around the wrong way. Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about LinkedIn. You're quite active on LinkedIn. I'm not at
Mm,
all. I think like a lot of people, we've sort of feel pressured to have our resume up there, and we connect with people and then never look at it again. How can we be using LinkedIn? And so for someone like me who doesn't use it at all, and I don't
mm.
even really understand how it's used. I know some people post things a bit like social media. Could you sort of tell us in a nutshell what the value is and how we can get value out of
Yes.
that?
Yes. So LinkedIn. So the raw deal is that LinkedIn is quite a very good tool for me. So as a recruiter, I will reach out to people and talk to them about a job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very good platform for
I'm
that.
always getting
So
messages from recruiters.
yeah, and they can be annoyingly or it can be targeted as well.
Yeah.
And so this is what I would say. You got to think of LinkedIn like an extension of your CV and portfolio. That's the truth of it. Okay. So you want to get all your experience on there. You want it to be succinct. You want everything to be available there. You can't, but LinkedIn as well, because it is saturated. And what you'll find is that you might get a job from there. You might meet a recruiter or you might meet an employer. I reckon employers aren't really looking at that. This is more recruitment focused. And where LinkedIn can be good is in a social networking tool, a little bit like a professional Facebook. If you're going to, if you on LinkedIn, if you think you're going to find something valuable in that feed, it's very unlikely. I find there's a lot of garbage there.
Oh,
So
good.
what
I'm
I'm
not
trying to get
missing
at is,
anything.
yeah, and I find that sometimes it's just a way for people to kind of get distracted at work and look vaguely professional because it's like, hey, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. But where it's been powerful for me, and this is an example for you guys, is that say it can be really good in terms of you could put an image out there and it can go a bit viral and it can grab a bit of attention. But you're not going to get a job on the back of that. You're much more likely to get a job from getting that beautiful CV portfolio, sending it to companies and calling them up directly. So I think that LinkedIn is overrated. No, let me rephrase. It's a tertiary thing. So your primary thing is the CV and portfolio and how you act about it. And it's secondary or tertiary. So don't overly worry about LinkedIn, but think about it like maybe you spend a few hours, 2 hours, and you just get your LinkedIn nice and tidy. So it's really clear who you are and what it's about. And then you leave it and you come back to it in a few months and you update it when, for instance, your job title changes because you become a registered architect, then you update it on there. Okay, that's all I think a professional needs. And then what you'll find is that when you're looking for a job, I think on there you can communicate to recruiters that you want to look, and then you'll find engagement. So think of LinkedIn as a vehicle of communication. You can find some really cool events on there, and you can see some stuff, but do not worry too much about, oh, I have to generate content every week. For a professional, I don't think you need to do that. It's just
Yeah.
good to keep up to date with the information every few months. That's it.
That's good to know. Yeah, I think it does have its place as almost a directory. I know often I go to a professional event and, you're not going to
Yeah.
share your Facebook with someone and you're never going to really become pen pals, but it's quite acceptable to become LinkedIn contacts. And then down the track, if I'm wanting to find them for a job or wanting to reach out to them for an opportunity, you can sort of find them. I think the other thing I would note is whenever I'm thinking about hiring someone, so we've got our sort of final 3 candidates, I'll always also do the sort of the check on the internet. So, you check if there's any sort of public Facebook things, and it's always interesting. But always the LinkedIn as well. And I think if you've got a good resume and portfolio, but it's pretty clear that your LinkedIn was sort of rushed together in 5 minutes, that can be a bit of a negative mark. So yeah, I still think it can be useful to keep it ongoing, maybe particularly for later in your career when it's not overtly looking, but just trying to keep track of who's doing what or
Mm.
stalking people in your community.
Yeah, I think you can use it if you're a job seeker. Where it can be useful as well is that you can kind of use it as a research tool, a little bit like you're spying on
Yes.
potentially.
Yep.
You can do it the other way. You can find how many people in the company. You can get a picture for it, how active they are, and
Yeah.
that can be useful. Or even finding someone's name. So maybe if it's not on
Yep.
the website, then you go there, you find a director, and you address it to them. So I think it can be a good tool, but I think it goes back to what we're discussing. It's a tool. It's definitely not the CV platform.com. It's just something that can be used sporadically.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice and relieving advice, because I was a bit stressed if you were going to say we should be on there full time as well.
No, don't. It's a myth.
So one of the big things we've been discussing a lot is obviously this job seeking thing during lockdown. In the past, I've been a really big pusher of dropping in a physical portfolio to have that opportunity to meet someone and show a bit of initiative. And at the moment, I've been suggesting it could be an interesting idea to do a little video introduction that you could send as something a bit different.
Yeah.
And of course, always follow up with a phone call. What are your thoughts on being a bit innovative at the moment when so many of our members are on lockdown?
Yeah, good question. I like it. I do like it. And it just goes back to my thing. If you've been innovative, think of it as not one or other. So it's not like, oh, I've sent a video, therefore I don't need to send a CV or anything mad like that. I just think that if you're going to be innovative, make sure that the tried old tested stuff really works first. So that CV and portfolio a killer, and then your cool, crazy idea on top. That's going to be the je ne sais quoi. That's going to be the bit that grabs the attention. But the point is, if the CV and portfolio are strong, and then Sarah, because she's busy, doesn't look at this innovative video, you still get the interview. And that's the way. So I love these ideas, and I think they're good. Just think of them as the cherry on top of the cake. But it doesn't matter how good. If the cake isn't good, it doesn't matter how many cherries you put on top of it. It doesn't matter. So get the basics right, and then all these innovations are good. I've seen good examples of now. We're actually pushing in terms of McDonald's company. We've invested huge in this video platform. So for interviews, so there is definitely something what you're talking about. The point is, in a video interview or a video message or all this kind of stuff, you're going to need to see that CV and portfolio, and you will live and die 100%. By the quality of your work.
Yep. And do you think, I guess this is just a little quick question, do you think there's much difference in how you should frame your resume and portfolio and all those things, depending on whether you're seeking your first job or looking for opportunities to change your job or trying to connect with potential collaborators or clients?
It depends where you are in life. I mean, it's I feel like I look back on all the CVs I sent, and they'll be very particular. So I remember, so a good example is my part 1 and part 2 CVs. They were very much about where I was at, who I am, and they were designed a little bit for the mass market, as in I didn't know what architectural practice I wanted. And when I graduated from my part 1, so when I was a grad, it was a bit similar to coronavirus, as in it wasn't a good time. It was 2009. It was the global recession. And so, yes, I would have loved to given you, Sarah, as employer, a beautiful handwritten portfolio or printed out. And the thing is that you have to be quite realistic, and especially if the job market's competitive, then the best thing you can do is kind of design it in a way to reach the most amount of people and the most amount of practices, because you have to, don't think that's a bad thing, because an employer, right? Put it this way, if you go for a few interviews, then when you pick a company you want to work for, you made an informed choice. You don't feel pressured. And going to interviews is the best thing you can do. And to go back to your point about different CVs, but when I was in industry and I wanted to work in recruitment, I did a tailored CV for Bespoke Careers and 2 other architectural recruitment companies, where I said, I want to work for an architectural recruitment company. I don't want to work for any other recruitment company. And that's because I am an architect, and this is the path I want to go.
Yeah.
So it's, oh, sorry, my phone was ringing. The point is, I think it's about where you are in your career and what you're about. And I think if you're in general milestones, then a nice CV, which is well-rounded about what you were looking for, is going to suit. And if you're working in a practice, but you're really interested in a particular practice, then because you have a current job, you can spend time and do a tailored one.
Yeah.
That would be my advice.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's great information. I didn't have this question on our list, but I think it would be a good one to ask, because I never really understood it either. And I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat. How does a recruiter actually work if people go down that path to finding a job?
How does it work behind there? I'm going to do it's gonna be one of my topics where I'm gonna go on a bit more full spectrum about the behind the scenes of recruitment, because it's quite hilarious. I think that recruiters don't want to talk about it because they're worried about it will offend people, and then everyone gets the wrong idea what happens. So generally, and so in short, recruitment, okay, we are hired to find people and we're paid for it. And it can sound like a lot of money. So what you've got to remember as a recruiter, so Sarah, you will hire me and I will get paid a percentage from someone's salary for an introduction. That's the the bit that everyone worries about hearing, because it sounds quite vulgar. You're like, excuse me. So the point is, a good recruit where I get involved. So Sarah, so you were like, I just want to find a part one. So a good recruiter is like, oh, come on, Sarah, you can do that yourself. You don't need me for that. But where I'm involved is that, so say now you're like, look, Steve, I have a healthcare project. I need someone with healthcare experience. They need to be Revit. They need to be very specific to the job, and I need technical stages. And I'm like, okay, that's going to be more tough because I got to find someone who has the experience you want, can fit in the area, can do all that. And that's why I say it's going to take me a lot of time, a lot of filtering, and there's a cost attached to it. The reason I bring this up is because graduates, you probably don't need to speak to recruiters just yet. And that's the truth. So, because if you think about it, right, if I'm hired on a mission to find people for Sarah, then that's why I've done the platform, the architectural social, and that's why places like your community, Sarah, are valuable, because that's going to be the most value to someone in that position right now at the start of your career. So a recruiter is going to be much more valuable to you when you're further in your career. And for instance, Sarah, you say, Steve, I need a job where I can not work crazy hours anymore. And I've done all this residential experience. I've done a bit of Revit, and can you find somewhere? And so it's a tailored search. And the reason that we offer more value then is because ideally a good recruiter, I'll come with 2 or 3 valuable options to where you are, Sarah, in your career at that point. And the reason I can spend time and energy on it is because that's what I'm paid to do. So the sooner you understand what a recruiter is about and how it stacks up financially, then you can understand where a recruiter's value is. So they're very unlikely to be the best person to help you your first job in industry.
Yeah. And the person who's job seeking never pays the recruiter, do they? It's always going to be covered by the employer.
Exactly. So
yeah,
and it would never be part of your salary. So what it is, the fee is based on a certain amount, and that factors in the introduction. So in short, just to demystify it, so finding people is stressful. Job seeking, whether you're an employer or a client, is stressful. And if you, Sarah, spend a whole day interviewing people and they're not suitable, and you spend a whole day sifting through CVs and they're not the right fit, then you've cost your company money, right? It's because, and so good recruitment should be, yes, it costs money, but I offload all that because I understand who you are and what you're about, and I find the relevant person. So that's where the cost is then justified. It's a bit like in architecture, and you get billed per hour, and it's the same thing of when you take a brief on board, there's a cost involved because that's how much work's involved. Why I think it's important to job seekers to understand the process, though, is that if a recruiter is looking for a very specific thing, then especially if you're starting off in your career, the best person to help yourself is you, because you could work in a residential project, you could work in and that comes from who you are, who you interview. And a recruiter is unlikely at the junior end to have many roles for you. So that's why I talk about how it works, so that once you understand that, you go, oh, okay, that's something to return to in the future. The best person is me. And why I think that's important is that because I've had it happen before where I'm really busy and someone rings me up, and I try to give them as much information as I can to get them on their way in 2 to 3 minutes. but it's never enough. And so that's why on the Architectural Social, or what you do, where you provide a lot of really good content we create, those are the places that you want to go for, where there's a lot of resources and you can do it yourself. So that's the way I would go about it. If you're early in your career, you probably don't need to spend too much time with a recruiter yet.
That's really useful to know, though, because I think a lot of people, even later in their career, don't understand how a recruiter works. And I thought until recently that I would have to pay that recruiter as well. So it's handy for knowledge for people to keep with them. This is just a note for everyone watching. We're about to jump into questions. So please have a think about your questions. Pop a little summary of your question in the chat so that I can shoot to you at the right time. I've already got one in there, so let me know. While you're doing that, Stephen, we did meet in the Mighty Networks course, actually. So tell us about your Mighty Network.
I think we met, didn't we? Because I was midnight with half a bottle of wine under watching Jurassic Park with my partner. Do you remember?
Yes.
I was so embarrassed.
Session. I didn't realize that was you, though. I just did a little search and I was like, oh, architecture related.
Yeah,
and we started to chat. Oh, that's hilarious.
I was the embarrassing one because it was like 1 a.m. I was like, hey.
Good on that guy.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I mean, that's the power of networking. And so it's interesting because, so the reason I set up the Architectural Social is because I was on furlough in the UK. And so what furlough is because of the coronavirus, is that I was working half the week. And for the first month, it was quite fun to have a glass of wine and watch Jurassic Park and do all this kind of stuff like we were on about. But then I just felt like I needed to do something or give a little bit back. And then I thought as well, going back to what we talked about recruitment, wouldn't it be great to have a resource where I can point people to when I can't immediately help them? Or wouldn't it be nice if there's a certain place, a certain community, right? And so the Architectural Social changes all the time in an organic way. It's a bit less so. I haven't actually been in your community, Sarah. Well, what I love about it is it's very focused, it's very niche, and it's for people that want to push in their career. And we have that a little bit in the Architectural Social, but it's a little bit more open-ended stuff in, and there's less one-on-one nurturing help. There's a bit of that, and I've done some podcasts, and there's a few crazy stuff. But where the Architectural Social, I see it succeeding so far, is that it's focused on the architectural community. There's loads of people there. There's less noise than LinkedIn, less noise than Facebook. It's really friendly people, and it's a bit open-ended. So
I sort of got the vibe when I was in there that it's almost like a digital footprint of the architecture network you have around you anyway.
Yeah, that's it. And so I've done a lot of webinars about CVs, portfolios, because that's really my strength. And what was cool is that we had someone who was an architect in the UK, and he fancied doing some Revit training courses. So I was like, yeah, come on, let's do that. Let's get that show on the road. So
awesome.
I think, so it'll be really interesting to see as an experiment what kind of things happen in there. And who knows, right?
And you've sort of got these little subgroups that are also managed by other people in the industry that are doing their own thing. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, there's a bit of that, and there's a few things that's like succeed or not, and I found that they haven't been the most successful thing. But what we're going to do soon on there is that my plan is to get all the architectural universities in the UK and then more on there, because I think that would be really cool to see all the students. And wouldn't it be nice for like students from one university to the other to talk to each other,
to have their place? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so cool. I think that's my goal. Huge. So I've got all 56, Sarah. I've got to ring them all now. I've got to put all the lessons that we talked about here and do it.
I don't envy you. So I guess for my crew watching, do check out the Architecture Social. It's completely free. You can just join up, and you guys are already familiar with the Mighty Networks app and everything. So you can find it and have a look around there, and there should be lots of interesting things in there. And then because Stephen is also going to post this chat into his network, I should do a little intro on the Architect Project, please. Which, as Stephen said, is a much more intimate thing. It's essentially, it's it's specifically for young aspiring Australian architects is the tagline, who want to work towards employment registration or doing their own thing, whatever their next level in their early career is, sooner and with more impact and with more confidence. And so it's all built around that. I think there's about 56 in there at the moment of us, which is a really good number. And then it's quite a structured thing. So every fortnight we have these type of guest sessions. Once a week there's a drop-in session where you can come have a chat to me. Every week there's a different little challenge so that you're sort of prompted to keep the wheels churning on what you're doing. And also sharing of resources and networking. And our network is a paid network, so it's $5 a week, Australian dollars. And but I think for particularly people from the UK, I think because the industries do overlap so much, if someone wanted to come in from ours, I've had a few people reach out that aren't in Australia, and my message is, yes, you're very welcome to come in and check it out. There's a 2-week free trial. And see if it's for you, just keeping in mind that the content will be Australia focused. But this first quarter is the quarter about self-development anyway, so it's not really like construction specific or things, so it is a bit more general. So that's us in a nutshell. All right, we've got some questions for you here, Stephen. So Georgia, I'm going to ask you to pop your video and sound on, please. And you can go ahead and ask your question to Stephen.
I might just unmute myself. I wasn't really ready to.
Hello.
Sorry, Georgia.
That's
all right. And then Steph, you'll be next.
So I'll just quickly ask about cover letters. You were mentioning before how sometimes you can find the director's name or something on LinkedIn. Sometimes you can't find anyone specific, or sometimes there's a few directors and you're not sure who to address it to, the cover letter. Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, do you know what? The cover letters, they're a bit like the bane of my existence, as in I completely all the time have different opinions on them. And so it is nice to do a custom covering letter, and I've done them before. What I think, though, is the point you're raising is that it's really hard to find this information, and sometimes it can actually stop the process. So I question whether or not a covering letter is needed all the time. So I used to do them. I've seen really good examples where, I mean, the CV and portfolios and a reference is going to be infinitely more powerful than a covering letter. And also with a covering letter, sometimes it kind of overlap the email that you send, so what I would say is that have a think about what value or that covering letter is added. If the covering letter is too long-winded, people get bored half the time anyways. And I think people really, I don't know. I mean, for me, when I look at CVs for my own team, I'll never look at the covering letter. I'll look at the CV first, then the portfolio, and then I'll have a little look at the covering letter. So in terms of finding information on it, if you can't find that information, I would suggest don't worry about it. And for that particular example, maybe what you can do is that if you can't find a particular name, I would have a quick sanity check. So always have a look quickly on the company, on the teams, or then go on LinkedIn and see if you can find the director, or you could even call up and just say, hey, I'm going to send a CV and portfolio. Who should I send the CV to? Ring up the company. They're going to be really friendly, really nice about it. They'll always say, you call up, they'll go, oh, Sarah does all the applications. You can address it to Sarah. So calling up is probably a good thing. But what I don't want you to do is worry about spending lots and lots of times for 1 or 2 pieces of information on the cover letter. When you're thinking of CVs, think about it practically. You don't want to spend too long on them, unless, for instance, that is the one company you want to work for in the world. If you're a graduate and you're going to look for a lot of places, then if you can't find the information in a minute or 2, you generalize it and go, I don't like to who main concern, but you could just be like, hi, I'm really interested in working with yourself at Owen Architects. I am a da-da-da-da. So there's ways around it, which you can do. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that is. And also you just mentioned the overlap of the email and cover letter. I've always been a little bit confused with that because I have felt like I maybe
Yeah,
repeated
that's a
what-
great question, Georgia.
Yeah, everyone has an opinion. You gotta remember that employers. So it's always taste of the company. I'm not a big fan of covering letters. I feel like if you can get the point across in an email, it's fine. Okay, but that's my opinion, and someone who runs an architectural practice may disagree. So you kind of have to weigh it up. I think that generally, if half of what's in the cover letter is in the email, then. So think about it. If you're going to do a cover letter, then make your email really succinct and clear and crisp. So if the cover letter says, oh, the big story about who I am, Stephen Drew, then maybe in an email you can go, hi, Sarah, I'm Stephen Drew, part of your architectural assistant currently looking. I've attached a cover letter, which gives a bit more information about who I am, CV and portfolio. Please let me know if you have any thoughts, right? Or you might go in the email, you might paint the picture a bit further. Again, it goes back to what we're talking about of there's no one way of going about it. You just have to look at the end, like, is the narrative right? Does the email flow into the covering letter, to the CV, to the portfolio, or is the email fine enough that it flows straight into the CV and portfolio? I will never again in my life do another covering letter, put it that way.
Yeah.
But it's subjective.
There you go.
All
Thanks,
right.
Georgia.
One more question leading on from that.
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
I've also been a little bit confused with the best way of like attaching the files, because sometimes I've had my resume at the start of my portfolio and it kind of the design, like the font and everything leads on, or should I have them separate?
Okay, cool. I've done a few of these. Just actually check out a few, because I've done an hour-long webinar on CV and an hour-long on portfolio.
Okay.
They're on the Architectural Social and on my YouTube channel for the Architectural Social. But the short answer, because we're here now, is that I like the CV and portfolio separate. That's my personal opinion.
I do too.
Yeah, I like it really. It's going to be really clear for the employer. So the file shouldn't be SD 2020 CV1. Okay, that's rubbish. It's going to be Stephen Drew CV, Stephen Drew portfolio, Stephen Drew reference letter. Really, really crisp. And you want to make the file sizes easy to open. You got to think and check the files are not sluggish. You know, if a file doesn't work on a phone, well, Sarah might be looking at the CV on her way to her next job and it doesn't load, and that's your chance gone. So the point is that make the CV import CV file 1 to 2 meg. You want your portfolio to be, I don't know, 5 to 15 sheets and no more than 10 meg. It's going to be easy to open and it's going to be nice separate files. And yeah, what I hate about when you bunch a file together is that if you have a small CV and a big portfolio, it's just a nightmare on the phone. So think about the practicalities of it all and think about what is the easiest way to show everything, because the easiest way to communicate and to get people to look at your work is always the best way.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks,
No
Georgia. They were
worries.
great questions. Steph, I'm going to ask you to pop your video on if you're willing.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Steph.
How are you?
Living the dream.
That's good. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It's really interesting to hear from a recruiter's perspective. My question was just about, I'm a few years into my career, so I'm not fresh out of uni. It sounds like tailoring your CV and portfolio to the type of firm you'd like to go for is really important. So I was just wondering what your top tips were in doing your research, apart from Instagram stalking and looking at their websites.
Good question. Okay, it depends what the brief is. So the truth is, I think if you're in coronavirus or panicky world, or right now where things are competitive, just make sure that the points of what you do are strong, CV portfolio strong, and that you hit the nail on the head. That your CV and portfolio is going to be suitable for the most amount of employers. Okay. That's not what an architectural practice will say. They'll tell you they want to look at the projects and all that. What I would say is maybe if I was looking for a job right now, when I was looking before, I sent my CV to 1,000 companies. So you have to remember that. That's my opinion. And that's what got me a job at a top 100 companies, because I applied everywhere. Okay, but what you might find is that, say now, for instance, Steph, you have like 10 to 20 places you really like. The way I would do it in my head is, well, when I'm looking for a job, I'd go like, look, I love Grimshaw. So they're going to be a step above the rest. Okay, so you have tiers of companies. So you're going to have companies which are going to be like the ones you really want to work at. One of them could be Sarah's company, one of them could be Grimshaw, and then they can be the generic ones. And so that when I say generic, I mean, maybe you don't know enough of them, but if you go for an interview, hey, they might be the best place ever, right? The happy accidents, because that's what happened with my company. They turned out to be amazing, but when I was going A to Z, I just didn't know who they were at the time. And so for the top 10 to 20 that you want, then you put a bit more research into it. And so you just think about it in terms of topics of conversation. So you might, for instance, say now Grimshaw have won a big planning project, then you might, a big transport scheme. So now they've just got the infrastructure, like the Sydney Metro, that was a big thing, wasn't it? So you could be like, I've just seen in the news, Grimshaw, you've got the Sydney Metro, and for years, I've absolutely loved Grimshaw's work. I've always, for instance, had a fascination and a keen interest into transport. I would love to join your team, Okay, so that's one example. Generally, the best way to relate to a practice is with their projects and their design ethos, and then the person. So that's the kind of thing I would look for, and I would just try to feed in information around that area for the ones that you're interested in, and for the rest of them, just go mass market and just champion all your strengths and abilities. You're never going to find there's never going to be there's no right or wrong way about it, but just think of it like a conversation. So is Sarah's company, then any news that she's got on the website and news on Google, that's going to be of relevant to the topic. Because I might go, I was really interested in this project, and then Sarah goes, oh, I was actually the project architect for it, and you're like, oh, I really enjoyed them pictures, and it's like, oh yeah, I did this and that, I did that, and suddenly you're building up a rapport, and that's what's going to get you the job.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, that's a good summary. We had one other follow-up question. Do I have my sound on? Yes, I do. The suggested limit for page numbers, you mentioned 5 to 15. Does that include title pages, dividing pages between projects, or is that not encouraged?
Damn, I shouldn't have said 5 to 15 because my worry is when I say these things, people cling to it and they go, oh, 6 to 15. And 16 might be okay, or it might just, because it's all about what's in them. And
does it feel digestible? I think is the
it's just
for me.
it's good.
Yeah,
I tell you, one of my pet peeves, I'm not a big fan of title sheets and covering sheets and all this stuff. A whole sheet.
Really?
Yeah, a whole sheet that just says Sarah's portfolio. I'm like, just go into it, right? If you're gonna do it, be clever with it. I think I've seen good examples of them where it could be, you could even put like a hero shot or what you've done, and you can illustrate what you want. But generally, in terms of they're the bane of my existence in my job, because I have to get rid of half of them, because what they do is they add to the file sizes and then make it. And I feel like that the cover, a title sheet, is that what we're on about, like Stephen Drew's portfolio? That just adds bulk to the portfolio. But remember, that's what I'm saying, that everything is subjective.
Yeah.
So you've probably seen a few that you like.
I probably differ on that one. And there's someone in the group, I can't remember who it is, has a really interesting cover sheet where they've sort of tied into a matrix of the different relevant experience, and it's really clear, and you see it right from the start. The big thing that gets me is I want to see an overview of what's university, what's personal, what's from a firm, because these days often it takes me a little while to work out, well, hang on, was this a uni project? Was it a group project? Was this a design competition that you did privately? Was this a job? So I like it if the cover sheet can sort of outline those things.
Yeah, I think the
or
point
a contents page, Georgia. Yes, in the comments. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what you're on about is something that you're offering value there.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm jaded, right? Because I've seen so many that I feel offer no value, that they just say Stephen's portfolio. And it's like, well, I know that because we're going into it. But if you could do something clever like you're on about, Sarah, then I think they're more valuable. But again, this is the point of like when we're on about 5 to 10 sheets, that me and you have a different opinion on this, and that's okay. And this is the thing, is that when you're looking for a job, say now I've got my own architectural practice and Sarah has hers, you're going to find that certain companies gravitate to certain different things. There's no right way. So I hate covering sheets, content sheets, but you like them.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's what, so as long as it works, so you're comfortable with it, then great. But
totally.
I just find that the content sheet doesn't mean anything if the content isn't valuable. And the point is,
that's a very good point.
You're saying that the content sheet was great because it was clever and it was thought out, and that's amazing. Yeah. And that goes back to what we were on about earlier, when something transpires into being special. But just the worst thing you can do is pad out a document with Stephen's portfolio, and then it goes a few sheets and it goes academic portfolio. So it's not gonna fill in for a lack of substance. That's what I'm on about. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Jeremy, with the final question, are you happy to pop your video on and ask it?
I know what this one is. I'm dreading this question. Oh,
hey.
I'm loving the background.
Yeah, well, I'm obviously you can't see behind me, but I'm transitioning into my parents' house, so I've got junk everywhere. So this is
that's much nicer.
This is in Fiji. I mean, not Fiji, Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right.
It's late. It's fine.
Yeah. So my question was, which you've probably seen, what is the most creative / standout portfolio? And the reason why I asked this.
Oh, I've seen so many. I can't put what's most creative. There's people in my head where I remember being wowed. Okay, and I think, what's the most creative portfolio? I can't remember. And that's the point. So there's no one way. I think that the best, most creative ones are, I need to think about this more. It's when I've been genuinely excited to get someone a job after watching them, right? Yeah. And it's so standout portfolio. Normally, I think a standout portfolio, okay, maybe look at it this way, where I get a sense of someone's personality and who they are, and I get this overwhelming feeling like they're driven and that they're very good, or I'm just wowed by it, right? And that can be, and where it can be with not gimmicks as well, right? It can just be like this, and it's what goes back to what Sarah's on about, where like everything in the portfolio down to a T is perfect, as in it's spell checked, it reads like a book. It could basically, when I think they stand out is when you could literally go to a ring binder and put a hard cover on it, and it's a book. Right. Yeah. It's like when I tell you what, I met this other guy in, I remember early in Bespoke when I was in London, and I felt like I was looking at a piece of history because he worked on, the CCTV tower and all this stuff. And I was wowed by the projects. And so that one sticks out to me because I got to see a bit of architecture history. But then equally, I remember being so impressed by someone who wrote their own programming, wrote their own script. And then we had this amazing journey where I felt like I was just discovering something with him. And so I was with him during this portfolio interview, and it was like a snapshot into what someone had done, which felt revolutionary. And so that one stands out. And then another really good example is, I remember there's a contractor that I got a job at Skidmore and Merrill. And I remember meeting him and going through his portfolio, and I was just like, this is the best thing I've seen in ages. Let's get you a job now. And then I rang up a company afterwards who I had a good relationship with, and I went, cool, are you hiring? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, I'm going to send you someone you're going to hire anyways. You just have to find some room for them because it's the best CV I've seen all year. And he went, all right, big words, we'll see. Yep. And in the end, we got an interview. And it's because I was so wowed. And then the guy went for an interview and he was like, yeah, just get him in. I like it too. And what it was is that it was genuineness, and it was nothing like So this one was nothing that any of you guys couldn't do. It was just so well put together, and it was so tasteful, and it was just it's so well curated. And so my point is, you don't need to have the CCTV tower with Rem Koolhaas in your CV. That did impress me. But what does impress me or stands out is I remember the people, and the people that stand out is just when their portfolio is just well succinct. It's like going on Dezeen. It's like going on all these places, and you go from it to start to end. There's a joy, and if your CV and portfolio is like a joy to flick through, then the person's going to ring up. And the way you do that, I think it varies from person to person. I just think a tasteful portfolio where you've got your personality, and then you communicate all the ideas you have in a really clear and crisp way that gets the employers excited, is going to be the portfolio that stands out.
Yep. Cool. Sounds good.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. No, it's great. It's interesting.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, we might wrap that up there. So our final question, Stephen, that we ask everyone who comes on as a guest, what is your number one piece of advice for young architects?
Right now, okay. Don't worry about imposter syndrome. You're going to think that you, sometimes you're going to doubt yourself. Okay. We've all been there. I do it all the time. That's healthy. It's normal. The best thing is to do it now. Okay. And when I say, I love the expression, just do it now, as in, what I wouldn't want you guys, it's like, there's a lot of conversations we've had here about what is the best portfolio you've ever seen? Or what if I can't find a bit of information and I can't do that cover and letter? What if I'm not going to be perfect? Okay. The first few CVs you send out, maybe you change them based upon the feedback that you get. You send the CV out. I ring Sarah up. She's like, look, Steve, I think there's potential here, but let's get the spell check. I didn't think the accuracy was there, and the portfolio was a bit long. Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate the feedback. Then I send my CV to the Grimshaw with Sarah's feedback. And guess what? I get an interview with Grimshaw. So you got to do things now. And I want to get past this thing of perfection. I remember there was a guy in my studio, and he had better work than me. He was a better designer than me. But he spent so long on the first few pages that he didn't communicate the rest of the project. And he had a worse grade than me. And my grade, I had a strong 2-1. And he scraped a 2-1. And it was because he was hell-bent to the end on communicating this idea, and he ran out of time. And what you can't afford to do right now, guys, is that you can't let things slow you down. If you haven't got the information, move on with it. Okay, that this is the kind of point of being an architect. When you get a brief, you get difficulties on the project and you overcome it. And that's like me with a professional. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. Okay, and with your CV and portfolio, and you getting a job, you got to think of it like a task, and you got to think of it like, I haven't got that person's, I don't know who they would address it to, but I'm going to send it out anyways. And you're going to keep going, and you're going to keep doing. And if you're worried about things not being right, you can tweak them along the way. It's like on the Architectural Social I posted last week, an infographic. It's still annoying me at the moment, but I just, you know what, if you look back, you can see the rubbishy ones I did in the start, and over time you see it progress. Okay. But if I got really precious about about everything, then there would be no Architectural Social, and Sarah wouldn't have her Instagram or anything, because
100%.
it evolves over time. But you got to do it, and by putting yourself out there and speaking to people in the community and speaking to each other and discussing with each other what works and what doesn't, and sharing and helping, then you're going to get a better result. You're going to go further, and that's the kind of person I would hire to be on my team. So the point is, do it now. Don't worry about being perfect, and challenge yourself. If you send 2 CVs today, why? I reckon you can do 10. Oh, well, this and that. Okay, we're not going to look back, but tomorrow, push it further. Get it out. The more things you do, the more feedback you have, the more you can improve, the more you are practicing architecture, the better you're going. So my advice is, do it now.
Love it. Thank you. Great sentiment to end on, Stephen. Thanks so much for your time. Hope
No
everyone
worries.
checks out the Architecture Social. And for anyone from the Architecture Social, do come check out the Architect Project. And thanks for your generous information. We really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I've enjoyed this a lot. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Goodo. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll sign off and I'll see you all around. Thanks everyone. Bye.